Yep,
and stop visiting. Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
Hi, Jim.
Lochner, you did, if Linda would have shut up 2 minutes earlier, Linda, and I said that in full joke, you know that. Lochner, you had the perfect lead into this session, but since Linda messed it up, we'll ignore it for now.
Man, you know, Linda, you gonna take that?
That's not a choice. You know, it's
I will wait and get my revenge in person whenever that is. I do not forget.
Whenever that is, yes.
So, I do not forget. Payback is a bitch, Gerard.
That's all right. I can deal with it. So as you probably can tell, my background is a little different than normal, and I'm in a chair, which I hate. I am in South Carolina, which is kind of cool.
Oh, cool. Where?
So I'm in South Carolina in a chair outside of Myrtle Beach. About 10 miles south.
You are literally down the street from me.
Yeah, not too far from you, actually. Yeah, we're about 10 miles south of Myrtle Beach.
Okay.
So
paybacks, here they come.
The pool, the beach, etc., drains the heck out of me, and I got to sit down and talk. So you guys know I do not like sitting down and talking. So I will do my best to try to put some energy behind myself, but a damn pool drains the hell out of you. The ocean even worse. All joking aside, to Lochner's comment or Rick's comment earlier, he was talking about how the fancy terms that people must use. And it's actually not how I was going to start this thing off, but it was one of the topics that I was going to talk about. And so just because you made me draw that link, you know, and all of you know I do not do agendas, we're gonna start with that idea and blame society as a whole starting 60 years ago for why we even need to have this webinar or this session in terms of a process improvement overview, or whatever it may actually be called. They've complicated it. You know, everything became much more fancy. You know, you had to call it, you know, QI or PI or process excellence or quality or Six Sigma or lean. They had all these fancy terms for it. You know, and you had people within organizations that wanted cool titles, and so they made fancy titles for those people that fit into different roles within the organization and things along those lines. And unfortunately, what it's done is it's made the discussion considerably harder for those people that don't want to go through some, I'm going to use the word crazy certification. You know, someone that doesn't want to get belts. You know, they don't care if they have a green belt or a black belt or whatever belt it is. But in order to do some of those things 50, 60 years ago, it started, and now that world continued to go that way. You know, nowadays we have terms like Six Sigma and lean. And those two terms are probably one of the largest barriers for entry for a consultant into this world. Because what does that really mean to a layman? And unfortunately, a lot of organizations that are out there, they said, oh, I've heard of Six Sigma. Yeah, let's do some Six Sigma. But they really don't know what that means. So what I want to do is go over a couple of things with you here this afternoon, the next half hour, 45 minutes. And going to involve you guys a little bit in some of this stuff. I know Jeff, Doug, Rick, a couple of you guys can share some concepts here as well. Andrew, yourself. I want to go over some concepts. Want to talk about what we're doing now. And I'm probably not going to talk about that very much. And I know to some of you that may be a little bit frustrating, but actually I'd rather spend a couple more minutes on where we're actually going in this world, because I think that's probably more important. And by this world, I mean the quality world, if you want to call it that. So one of the first things that we need to do is, what's the purpose of process improvement or quality or whatever it may be? Trusted advisors has basically come down to, there's two things that a process needs to be. And the amazing thing is it's not Six Sigma, it's not lean, it's not anything else. It's two really simple, basic words. It needs to be efficient and it needs to be effective. So I ask you, what's the difference? What does efficiency mean? Start with that one. What's efficiency mean?
you say Alan or
Time and
Al?
money.
Doesn't waste time.
Efficiency just means doing it faster.
Okay.
You can screw up with more rapidity as well. Efficiency is a great result, supposedly, of automation. But as we all know, automation doesn't necessarily make things better.
Perfect. Okay. Other concepts on efficiency?
I'd say it doesn't waste time. Sorry.
Doug, I heard you say using less resources.
to get
less cost, less
equal or
resources.
better results.
Okay.
I think I jumped in with not wasting time.
Not wasting time. Thank you, Andrew. All right. Efficiency, according to the definition. There's two of them. Doug or Rick, this first one I think goes to you a little bit, that it probably could be a little more simplified for the common folk, but Webster's calls it effective operation as measured by a comparison of production with cost, as in energy, time, and money. Pretty simple in reality. Does it need to be that complicated in terms of how we define it? No. The other definition of it is the ratio, and this, Doug, I think goes well with what you were saying, the ratio of the useful energy delivered by a dynamic system to the energy supplied to it. And that actually sounds somewhat like the way Doug would actually speak as well. So I don't know if Doug pulled.
That definition's brilliant.
Yes, Doug loves that. So that's what efficiency is. Okay. I mean, once again, I think, Adam, I think it was you that said it first, sort of just, doing it quick, just getting things done. The most efficient way. You use the idea of automation. We'll talk more about that in a second. So effectiveness, just as important. What's the definition of effectiveness? What does it mean to be effective?
Producing improved results.
It meets requirements,
I like
Doing
that,
the
Jeff.
right things.
meets customer requirements.
Doing the right things, meets customers' requirements.
High quality.
High quality,
Yep. Achieve results.
achieve results. I'm on board with all that stuff. That's all good stuff. That's really, Adam, you specifically there at the end, I think. The definition according to the law, the degree to which something is successful in producing a desired result or success. If I look at that, and I can then combine efficiency and effectiveness, I'm now talking about, and Jerry, Linda, I'm not sure which one of you ladies it was, talked about the results, the outcome.
Mhm.
Critical. So, Adam, you made the comment earlier, can something be efficient but not effective?
Of course.
Yeah.
So now here's my example. I'm in South Carolina. I'm at the beach. The wife buys gadgets. That's one of her things. They're currently at the beach, so they might walk in the door any second, and I'll have to stop telling stories and using Jen as my example. But she buys gadgets. And one of the things that she went out and bought were waterproof phone cases. Your phone is nowadays, they're supposed to be waterproof anyway, but she said, I want to put a case around it so that I could literally take video, and they're taking video underneath in the pool, the kids underneath the water, et cetera, et cetera. Relatively inexpensive. So my first thought is that it was probably made efficiently. They probably did not waste any resources. The problem was that they did not guarantee it. And in fact, they suggested that you submerge the case without your phone for 30 minutes before even trying to use it on your phone. So what I just heard is I've got an efficient process that may not be very effective. Now, for us, we said, okay, the efficiency of it, the cost of it made it that, we'll take that extra step and dump it in the sink and make sure it works. So now we've got video of the girls swimming underwater. Great, yippee, yippee, yippee. We're all excited about that. Now, what about the other way? Can something be effective but not efficient?
Of course.
Yep.
Okay. So what if I make reproductions of a piece of art using my hand and a pencil and colored pencils and, those kind of things? A non-valued, not expensive. I'm not talking about making something that's, a new piece of art. That's probably effective. I can copy, if I know how to do artwork, I can copy a picture. I can look at a picture on the wall and draw it out. So it can be effective. But with today's technology, of the ability for printing and scanning and all those other things, is that the most efficient way for me to create 100 copies of a print? Absolutely not. So for you guys, as you're talking and working with your clients, where do you find, well, and let's say it from both ways, where do you find the successful implementation of being both efficient and effective? Also, where do you find, and this is more of what the opportunity section will be, where have you found that a company is focused on one and not the other? Jeff?
Most of the time I get called in, it starts with effectiveness of process because it's not satisfying the customer and they're spending all their time firefighting. Once we get the process effective, and that means we probably jump to another process to fix those ones first, but then we go back to the original one and we look at how can we make it more efficient. We bring some more lean into it, or some more cycle time reduction into it, and make it a lot more efficient than it was.
Okay. So you think that they, sorry, go ahead.
That's my typical process.
That's a typical project. So for you, what you're seeing is that they're asking for effectiveness, but what really ends up happening is that they need to then create something more effective and then make it more efficient.
Because if you're not
Kind of
effective,
depends.
it doesn't matter how efficient you are.
Yes. Yes.
Charles?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I guess another example I see a lot in small shops is they have one very skilled resource that's totally overused and becomes the bottleneck. And if this guy has an accident and doesn't show up for work, I mean, they're in big trouble.
That's a great comment, because that's actually going to lead a lot to sort of where we go down the line here as we move this conversation further. Adam, did you have something else to add there?
Just that often it depends upon where you're coming from. For example, you may, effectiveness can be found in the moment. You can recognize if you're getting good results or not. But efficiency is often.
And then we lost Adam.
Adam just froze us, and I want to give him a second to come back, because I kind of liked where he was going there. I wanted to see what his thought was. We'll give it a second here.
Come back, Adam.
Yeah. Magical Adam is not coming back.
You got to admit, from a timing perspective, he's talking about efficiency and he froze.
Something that's a historical thing.
Oh
my
right?
God.
Oh, Adam, you froze on us, and we missed something there. And I'm not sure we heard the beginning about effectiveness, and you were just going into saying that you could notice effectiveness right off the bat, or easier to notice.
Yes.
By looking at something, but then you were just about to go into efficiency. I'd love to know what that thought was.
Efficiency is often something that you have to look back on. You have to have a historical perspective to understand what it did cost in energy, time, et cetera. And so if it's a bean counter, a CFO or somebody with an operational cost agenda, I'm going to lean toward efficiency is going to be a big buzzword for him, a big hot button. If it's somebody like an engineering team leader, a CEO, is probably going to be more effective. This is going to get the sale done. Ultimately, as you said, you're going to have to address both. But often it'll be who comes to you with the need that's going to indicate from where you're going to first make a difference. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I definitely agree with you.
Thanks.
Jerry, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I did. I think there's a question about results too, because there are times when you can have a dictatorial type of CEO or manager who gets efficient results, effective results, just by mandating it, but they're not sustainable results. And so sometimes you want effectiveness in terms of long-term results. So you do team development and you build a culture and then allow people to buy into what the goals are, and it may take longer, so it may not be as efficient, but then it has sustained effectiveness because you've managed the culture to the point where other people buy into the goal.
Absolutely awesome comment. Not that I'm rating comments, but awesome.
I always say it's a number 3, Gerard. That's a third part, because if you can't sustain it, and you could have the first 2 and not have the third, but if you can't sustain it, you're not going to go far. Jerry's absolutely right about that.
Yeah, that's where I always add the third element, although I don't call it sustainability, I call it adaptability. And so it's great that because typically organizations are measuring efficiency and effectiveness. They're measuring, how well they produce whatever they produce and at what optimal cost that they're producing it. What they're not paying attention to is the demand for what they produce is going down or changing. And if they don't, because one of your definitions talked about desired results, and that is a moving target over time. And so if you're not paying attention to what is desired, you have to bake in adaptability to this, or sustainability. I mean, I choose one or the other, kind of the same idea.
Rick, I think
but the $6 million question is, I ask how they measure adaptability. And very rarely do I get a good answer, because people just simply don't know how to measure it.
To go back to Rick, to your comment about schools earlier, it's kind of funny. It's the continuous improvement was a term that I think you're talking about in reality in terms of adaptability. But I think it also includes Jerry's idea of sustainability, because I think that they're actually slightly a difference there. And I think that when we look at process improvement, to use that term, we need to be able to be adaptable, because the things are going to change. And we're going to obviously talk about that more in a little bit as we get into, what we're doing, especially in today's COVID world and what will be post-COVID world. But the sustainability, Jerry, I think just even to take your point one step further, because I think that's a great, really valuable point, is it needs to be sustainable and repeatable. They have to understand, they have to be able to do it again. Jeff, I'm not going to have you go into it, but one of the things that Jeff has done a lot in his past, and some others as well, is we looked at the world ISO. The idea of ISO is being able to document that process so I can do it over and over again. And I can guarantee the result's going to be the same. And the thing about ISO, it's great in that, yes, I can guarantee I'm going to do the same thing over and over again. But here's the problem. One, I apologize in advance, but this is the only way that I think you have to apologize for the term, but you need to use it. If I say I make shit, if I can consistently make shit, I could be ISO certified. Now, I know it's a lot more complicated than that, Jeff. Don't worry, I'm not attacking ISO in that aspect. But the problem with ISO, once again, high theoretical, very lofty thought process. People are saying, well, ISO, that's kind of confusing to me if I'm not in a manufacturing role. But the other problem is ISO goes against Rick and Jerry's point about adaptability and sustainability, because things need to change.
Yeah, but isn't that why ISO mandated that you don't delegate ISO standardization to a team, that the leadership team has to be directly engaged in that?
Yes.
Right, with the new 215 rules.
Yeah.
Correct. It's the change that they're making. And it's going to, once again, is the question becomes, is that senior team going to use that adaptability or that sustainability or that idea that standard operating procedures, SOPs, are not the right term? They're old terms and they have good value to them. But unfortunately, I believe for most of our affiliates and what they want to be able to do with their clients is they're actually restricting the affiliate from giving full value to their client.
I think that's not asking the right questions then.
Okay, fair.
Because I simply have not run into that question, and I've been more of the challenger than not. With the sustainability, adaptability, depending on how you want to look at it. And, and a lot of that was prompted by Jeff's sessions at Power Summit on explaining the 215 rules, where leadership is now should be an active part in order for accreditation to occur. You can't hide anymore. Right. So if it isn't working, at least senior leadership knows about it. Whether they do anything about it, that's a different story altogether.
Yeah, but that's also your role as well, as an outside consultant or facilitator or change agent, whatever you want to call yourself, to make sure that senior staff is putting in the culture into place. I think, Jerry, you brought up culture earlier, that culture into place so that those continuous pieces can happen.
Yeah.
So, Doug, go ahead.
This is a question, it could be for anybody. I guess I'm thinking of Jeff more than potentially anybody else. And that's, years ago, Godshaw used to kid about you could make concrete life jackets, and as long as you made them the same way all the time, then you could get ISO certified. But I got some pushback from somebody on that said that there's something in one of the newer ISO standards that talks about suitability for use or something like that. I don't know whether that was accurate. I mean, it's not something that I've spent a lot of time with, so I have no idea how the ISO standards, where they started versus where the 22,000 ISO certification or the ISO standards are today. So I don't know whether suitability for use is or is not part of a legitimate ISO standard anyplace. That's just an open question.
It is.
It needs to be suitable. It's got to meet customer requirements. It's got a big tie into customer satisfaction. A big thing on really performance metrics. So if your processes are not delivering efficiently or effectively, your numbers are going to tell you that, and you are required by the standard to take corrective action to fix it. So, it's come a long ways. I mean, I've been watching that damn thing since 1987, which is pretty bad, but it's gone through about 6 revisions since I've been watching it and working with it, and it's a lot better now. But the thing that is really cool, though, is kind of, again, what Jerry was suggesting. If you get ISO and then you start working with culture, it's an incredible combination, because you've got the right attitude and you've got the processes and everything you need to really drive a business in the right direction.
You need a process for customer research and for handling complaints. That's part of the standard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you all.
So,
Of course, with a concrete life jacket, there won't be that many complaints.
But if you're selling to a crime syndicate, it might be perfect.
Only once.
Sounds like a process to me.
So where you guys are going right now with this conversation makes me want to sort of skip and once again mentally go from where we are right now to another point. But I want to ask the question first. Is there anyone that on the call that's not at least somewhat familiar with the approach that what used to be called TQI, our process improvement, with the 2 days executive seminar, the day executive seminar, the 5-day cycle time, the DMAIC model for values? Are you guys at least all somewhat familiar with that? Matt, no, okay. Mostly yes, a little bit, Tom, okay. All right. See some of you guys I know been through certification more than once, and some of you have not. Let me just take a minute then, and I don't want to take long on this, but I do want to give you a minute, because in the short term, there are solutions that we've put into place. I mean, by that I mean trusted advisors, and going back to the days of the Total Quality Institute, that we put into place to be able to do portions of what we're talking about. So we could get the senior staff on board. We could put them through either half day to full day, what we call executive seminar. And what we do in that is that we look at their management style, their culture around process. We help them define what quality would be for their organization. We help them identify what processes, what steps within the organization we should look at, and a variety of different things along those lines. Rick, I want to say it was you that was talking about at one point the management buy-in factor of ISO. Well, that's that executive seminar, fits pretty well into that area. Then what happens is that you get the teams that actually get involved in actually doing the work. And the work is, once again, I'm going to go back to the bad terms. And I don't mean bad in reality, but the less effective terms. And that is Lean and Six Sigma. So your efficiency is Lean, effectiveness is Six Sigma for general purposes. The thing is, and you guys have all heard good comments from so many of you that I'm not 100% confident I can connect the right name to the comment. Does it make sense in any way whatsoever to be efficient if we're not effective? And if we're going to change one of them and you had to sacrifice the other, would it make sense? And so that's one of the, I'm going to say one of the negatives of the current approach at process improvement is that we got cycle time, or we've got lean, or root cause analysis, or variation. Once again, we're not going to get into too much of the technical stuff on that. But we've got those two processes that focus primarily on efficiency and effectiveness. Now, Jeff, you specifically said earlier, and Jeff, for those of you that don't know Jeff is probably should be in my chair and I should be in his, is more of a guru on this stuff than many in our network, quite frankly. But Jeff talked about his client brings him in because he needs to be effective, but then he realizes that they need to be efficient. So the way we have it now is that's two separate processes. And what typically that means as two separate processes is that typically our approach up to today and for the next couple of months is we actually look at efficiency first, because that's how in cycle time reduction, we rebuild a process. And then what happens is that we can then put the process into place, and then using a model called DMAIC, and if you don't know what it is, don't worry about it. It's define, measure, analyze, improve, control. You're more than welcome to search and look it up, but it's not too critical. But we use that process then to measure the effectiveness of our new efficient process. And then we may need to go back and tweak that process. So, to use our terminology, does that sound all that efficient in the real big picture? My answer is no. Has it been very effective for many affiliates over the last 1992, I think was when TQI got started. So what was that, 30 years ago. Has that been very effective for clients? Absolutely. Has it been very effective for our affiliates? Absolutely. You know, go look at Godshall's, house and car, and his kids are doing pretty well. It's made a lot of people a lot of money over time. But is it necessarily the best solution for a client? Now, Jerry, I'm going to go back to your sustainability concept. Rick, back to your adaptability concept. Back to the discussion we had on culture, the discussion that we had on teams as well. I want to talk a little bit about where we're going. Now, when I say where we're going, if I had a clarity score on it, I would say it's a 6 or a 7. If I looked at my attribute index report, I was looking at a clarity score, I'd say it's probably a 6 or a 7. It's not crystal clear, but it's definitely a positive bias in self-direction, in that we know how we're going to get there. We've got some of those steps already, and we're in the process of doing that, but we've got a good idea of what it looks like. And here's the thing. How can you have process improvement without people development? I hope that most of you would say that the answer, you really can't. If I don't, if I don't, and I'm going to talk about people development even on a larger scale than what we typically look at as a leadership program or a sales program, but I'm going to look at the people development portion of that being all the way at the very top of defining culture, and then filtering that culture down through the organization as part of people development. Okay, because I think that really is a critical part of people development. And you're seeing that more and more right now with our materials, our tools, our methodologies, our mentalities, and your areas of expertise or your areas of focus and concentration. So we need to figure out a way to make it efficient and effective to bring together process and people. So what we're looking at is actually creating some new material. And I probably shouldn't even say, it's not going to be necessarily all that new, because I don't think, and I think Jeff, you and I had the conversation a year ago. Actually, Andrew, it might have been you too, and Bob Miller, I think as well. I don't know if he's on the call. I don't think so, but we talked about, is there really a lot of new stuff in the quality world? And the answer is really no. It's, Adam, I think to your comment from earlier, make stuff quicker at a less cost so I can make more money. You know, that's still the concept. Not new rocket science, nothing after, you know, I mean, Deming and Duran and Crosby and Carlson, you know, those guys, you know, came up with some great concepts. And even the ideas of Six Sigma are based around those same concepts. So as we look at what we're doing going forward, as I say, create some new materials, we're actually going to create some new materials based on some of our existing content. But what we're really going to do is look at creating a new white box. And I know you guys, especially if I look around on this call, a lot of you have gotten away from the white box concept in terms of here's what the program is off the shelf. Some of you don't even know what the white box is, but you know, the program off the shelf, the leadership program has 12 chapters of text, 3 red tabs, 6 yellow tabs, 3 blue tabs, 2 green tabs, and 2 white tabs. Now, you know you've been doing it long enough when you can count the tabs in each program mentally without, you know, without your library in front of you. We're going away from that. And what we're doing, though, is we're creating something that could be a white box. But what it also could be is a Rick Lochner Core 4. And I use the number 4, although that's the wrong number. But just, I think most of you have heard the concepts of Rick and Core 4, but as one of his major facilitation works with his consulting, with his coaching clients and stuff along those lines. So he grabs a section of 4 key components, puts them together, delivers, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Different conversation. I'm sure there's a video of that on the website somewhere of Rick going over that in a lot better detail than I will ever do for him. So what we're actually doing is we've got the outlines already. There's actually content already there, although it's being I don't know if rewritten is the right word, reformatted, refocused, etc., to actually create chapters about 3 major things. The senior staff buy-in, Lochner, you talked about that earlier. 2, efficiency, and 3, effectiveness. In addition to 3 chapters of text, there's also, once again, and this is why I'm saying we're not 100% clear. Here's where we're seeing 3 orange tabs. I threw out the color orange. So if you like that as a cool, new, different color in your action plan, all me. If not, it was our chief marketing officer, and you can reach her at jenna@tanetworkllc.com if you have any complaints. No, but we figured it would go, I thought it was a good idea. But anyway, we're going to have sections in the action plan that will be more like what you would experience in the implementation stages of the existing cycle time reduction and variation reduction. So what we're looking at doing is to create a process, and what will happen, and this is one of the really cool things, Tammy's doing the Leadership Soft Unveil on Thursday of this week. Thank you. I'm just looking for a confirmation from Wendy. So I don't want to take too much from that, but one of the things that we're really looking at is creating a core mentality or core process that literally 5, 6 major topics that every person in the world needs. They need to have better attitude. They need to have better goal setting, et cetera. And building a leadership process, but then going forward, being able to take a core of the leadership process and add to it, literally taking a core, meaning taking the exact same chapters and adding to it content, other chapters to that, to then make the program fit what the customer needs. So it's literally, great, I need communication, I need goal setting, I need, you know, attitude development, et cetera. I need those things, but I also need to learn how to manage my people better, do performance reviews, and manage my time. Well, actually, no, time management is one of the automatic ones anyway. But so I would take that, we're going to create that, And that becomes our new management program. What this is going to enable us to do as an organization is, to Rick's point earlier, become much more adaptable. Right now, as we look at materials, there's some materials in our library that need to be updated. The thing is, the whole thing doesn't need to be. If we can come up with a core that can work across an entire organization and then plug in the other components at different levels, great. The core is going to need to be updated. And we can continue to do that more often than we've been able to in the past. And the individual concepts, the management philosophies, there's going to be new ones, so we're going to need to update those. But at that point, it may be updating 4 or 6 chapters. So it can happen much quicker. So why I'm saying all of that is to go back to what this process improvement thing could be. What we see it being is one of 2 options. Core 4 to Rick's concept, and it would be very, very similar to what they would currently experience. A little different formatting and things along those lines, but we would combine variation and cycle time into one piece. Efficiency, effectiveness combined into one piece, and that's all you would do with the client. And you get those 3 chapters, you get those 3 sections of the action plan, and that could be your program. But once again, to go back to a point that I made a little while ago, we don't think that's doing your client enough service, because in order for the process to work right, the biggest input on the process is the person. So if I don't develop that person and the skills that they need, the attitudes that they need, the whys, and et cetera, they're not going to be able to implement the process as best as possible. So that's where we're going. Now, Doug, go ahead.
I've got a question.
I have no more answers.
One of the things that Grant and I have been listening to and reading a lot of recently is how important digital transformation is even down to smaller organizations. To my recollection, there was not a whole lot of information in the existing cycle time piece that talked about how digital transformation impacts efficiency and effectiveness. Can that get written into this version?
Could it get written into this version? Wendy, if you want to write that comment down just for me, because I'm at a small little itty-bitty table. It doesn't have any room for a piece of paper. Charles, do you want to address it, or do you want me to answer that first, then you go something?
I think digital transformation's badly needed and all that good stuff, but I see a far more fundamental problem, and that is when you talk about the 2 tools, we talked about culture. I think Adam mentioned you have to have historical data. And with TQI, you already assume people understood process and measurement and integrating that with structure. And for most people, that's an unknown. That's a foreign concept. And that's a part of really building a culture that's going to be quality conscious. And I think we need to be more remedial in how you address that topic of measures.
Where was the chapter that Grant and I and others, Jeff, put together a year ago? The process?
That overview is there. Quite frankly, I'm not sure anybody that's actually used it with a client. So I can't direct to it. Is that chapter part of our conversations in this area? It was probably about 2 years ago. Yes. As we look at what we're doing now, and creating these pieces, because that chapter was an overview piece, which.
Well, it was to address what we're talking about.
Yeah, was more of a learning type of piece of before the process.
Yeah, Charles's point about, let's get them comfortable with, at that smaller, at that people level, the value of it, but not at a level where we acronym and buzzword them to death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have accountability at an individual level for the process.
Now, one of the problems that I've always had about the old TQI approach is that if we look at our leadership programs and such, we've basically sort of focused on one way from top down, bottom up, side up, whatever you want to say, and address the issues of an organization. But then from the TQI basically says, hey, we're going to organize the top team and we're going to organize the other teams and so forth. So it was a whole parallel approach. It wasn't integrated. And so when we conceived the idea of the process chapter, the idea was to start that integration, which is you could put the process chapter in any of the processes, or customized or whatever, and try to orient people toward process improvement. And if that became one of your strategic goals to improve the processes around here and get specific about that, then you could go into the tools that were process improvement. That was sort of where I was coming from.
And I think that concept is exactly where, maybe that's where it actually originally came from, as we've been sitting around our virtual table, Wendy, Dan, and myself, about how to make this thing actually work better, and being more of an involved process instead of a side, something off to the side. I think, Grant, you used the word parallel places. But yes, instead integrating together. So, Doug, to your comment, that's something that definitely possibly could be added in and looked at. And I don't know if it comes in the form of content or if it comes in the form of facilitation. I don't know the answer to that question yet. Because one of the things is, as I was looking at, what we were going to talk about today and putting together my 75 or 80 pages of notes that I have, one of the big things that was, and the reason why this conversation started to come up around our virtual table, is the new world that we're going to. And I don't want a post-COVID conversation or what's going on with COVID. That's not the intent of this. But what I am going to tell you, and I saw some of the comments that were in the chat, and it sort of relates a little bit to that also. This world is becoming, and Rick talked about earlier with college, this world is becoming more technologically advanced, and not necessarily advanced, but using the technology quite a bit more in the last 4 months out of necessity. Well, that necessity is going to become part of what's really going to happen. I got a message from my brother-in-law who works for, is it Merrill Lynch, I think, one of the companies out of New York. And he says, as of now, he's now pushed back to January 1st before he has the possibility of going to an office. Well, here's the thing. That's a new process. Doug, to your comment, that's automation to an extent, integration and things along those lines, because that's what's going to happen. And so as we look at the future of where we're going, organizations need, and Rick, I use your name a lot today, I apologize, but the adaptability piece, as things around their environment changes, in order to be adaptable, they need to be able to look at their process and how they do things. I mean, and I'll use one example, and then I'll either wrap it up or let you guys have, if anybody has any questions. Mott's Lower Level Bar. Some of you have been inside of my bar. Most of you know I own a bar. In Pennsylvania, the laws are extremely strange. I've literally, thankfully, I've got a pretty good understanding of this stuff and have been doing it for 20 years, and in the bar business for 12 or something like that. But in the course of 3 weeks, I went from being completely shut down to I can have 50% occupancy to I can have 25% occupancy. No one can sit at the bar in a bar stool. You must order a meal in order to have a beer, and you can't stand up in the facility unless you are walking to or from the bathroom or front door. Those are how specific the rules are in Pennsylvania right now, or at least in our area in Pennsylvania. Myself, Nick, Katie, and Jen, who is the 4 core of my staff, have met several times to redesign a new process each time this happened. I know, well, I'm hoping at least it'll wait until Sunday or Monday when I get back into town. It's going to happen again for the restaurant industry. I mean, Doug's been in the little, the dungeon, the basement for many a time. Mike, I know you've been there before. I'm a bar. I am not a restaurant. We do not have a kitchen. Well, in order in Pennsylvania for me to be open, I need to be able to serve food. Well, Mott's Lower Level now has the coolest hot dog roller with the best tasting hot dogs anywhere in Berks County, Pennsylvania. And every once in a while, my wife will throw some meatballs in a crock pot. I've got another one of Katie, who I mentioned earlier, one of our other employees. She's working on red beet eggs, and Nick is putting in, there's some Mike Myers, Spanish pentecillas or something like that. They're like dough with like meat or something in the middle. They call it?
Empanadas?
Yeah, that word. Yes. We have guys making, I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to eat them, but I've had guys bring that in. Once again, these are all, so for us, we literally changed everything about the way we do business in order for us to stay in business. 6 weeks ago, revenue is zero. Now revenue is probably 50%, 60% of what it was, March 1st. Well, guess what? 60% pays all the bills and pays all my employees, and they can all pay for their.
Everybody froze. It must be me.
Was that? Yeah, pretzels do not count, Doug. You're right. And there's actually a specific article written by the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board that says pretzels don't count. The New Jersey governor, I think, said that chicken wings don't count either.
Hey, Gerard, do I have permission to screen share with you guys?
Probably if I make you a co-host. Or if Wendy makes you a co-host.
Tell me when to go.
Go ahead.
Okay. This is what Grant and I happen to be on a call. Hopefully you guys can see that.
Yep.
But digital transformation is at the bottom of that screen, and it's the only one that was net positive based on the impact of COVID. Revenue, supply chain, growth, demand, business ops, cap spending, employment, hours, basically how many organizations, and this was a pretty extensive survey of organizations between 10 million and $1 billion. And it was the only one that was net positive. So for us to not take this into, start to take this kind of conversation in terms of, we're probably doing ourselves a disservice in terms of kind of not staying up with what's on people's minds.
Great. Thanks, Doug. That's a good slide.
So let's apply that to Mott's Lower Level. Effectiveness and efficiency, digital transformation. How do you do it?
Mott's Lower Level will not get into the digital world because that's just the laws of Pennsylvania. We're never going to make money on being able to order stuff online and someone coming picking up a hot dog and a beer.
There's no Wi-Fi?
Was that?
There's no Wi-Fi at your bar?
We have Wi-Fi there. Yes. Yeah, we do have Wi-Fi and technology.
Well, but it brings up the point of who are we aiming this at? So it sounds as though we're searching for a few universal principles that we can include in a few chapters and even with some tabs that would fit most of the people in our product, out in our customer set out there. And so what are those things? Is it cycle time reduction? I guess what I could say is that certainly from my experience over the years, most people don't know how to organize work. And that would include every team leader out there, regardless of what their background is. And so you can start there. That's sort of a universal skill that people need. How do I organize a project? How do I organize my work? How do I organize my individual's work? But, if I look at the data analytics industry and programming and the scrums and all those sorts of things and how they do their processes, are we prepared to go into there and say, hey, you could do it better, do it this way? Or if we take all the biotechs in my surrounding, can I go into the lab and say, okay, let's do cycle time reduction, see how this place ought to run? And so then, but if I go out and look at an assembly plant that's all automated, or a steel plant that's just got one person sitting up there rolling bars of steel, what's our target group?
I think your initial, you start that phrase, or you started that comment, I think is really the critical element. Something that's universal enough that, and Doug, and I think as the chat's gone on the side and from your comments, the digital transformation conversation perhaps needs to be a little bit deeper, not deeper, meatier in these new content, as you guys are expressing sort of the need there. But other and outside of that, I believe that we still stick with the same rule that your job as the facilitator is then to bring the specific thing there, not to solve the problem. We're not going down that path of here's the solution, but your job will be to bring that, I hate to use the word generic because it sounds negative, but it's really not, the generic information and learning to that team, and then for you to help them take that learning and apply it to their organization. Because once again, the needs of Mott's lower level versus the needs of your scientist companies that you're working with down there, are obviously very, very different. But we, as a network of 250 people, the markets go from, I mean, Arnie's not on the call, but Arnie works with companies probably the size of Mott's lower level. And Doug, worked with companies called the U.S. Army. You can't get much, spread out from there. So can we try to shoot down the middle? Then you guys use your area of expertise, which I think you guys have been doing, some of you for 40 years, some of you just for a couple. But that's, I think, where the key is. So I think that this conversation helps us look at some of the ideas of where to go from here as well.
One of the things that, Wendy, if you'll just make a note from this conversation on whatever piece of paper is in front of you, and there's no sarcasm with what I'm about to say.
Uh-oh.
But when it comes to digital transformation, I believe applied knowledge is power. So we can do a certain level by providing principles to people. But I think where we need, well, I'll individualize this. I think where I need to step up my game is when somebody says, I get it at the fundamental level, but how do I actually do it? When should I be using Agile versus Scrum versus other kind of processes? And I'll be the first to admit, I don't always have a glib, accurate answer to that question. Now, maybe that's as easy as falling off a log for somebody like, Grant or Jeff Tate, Jeff Johnson, or other people on the call, but it's certainly not from me. And so where I get stuck is sometimes the devil is really in the details. And to be able to just kind of do knowledge without being able to say, and by the way, this is where you apply this piece of it versus, oh, no, on this, you're better off going down this path versus this path. I think that, because that's why I think in some cases people get stuck. They mark time because they'd rather do nothing than do something wrong and have it cost them $1 gazillion.
Right.
So it's just editorial, but that's kind of where what you kind of spurred in my head as a result of today.
That may be heavily content-based, or that may be facilitation-based. That's one of the other things that you're seeing is that, as we go forward in materials and stuff, and you'll see this a little bit in leadership, there's pieces that need to be in the content because every organization needs it. Or every individual within an organization needs it. But there's some things that may go a step further that is going to be a facilitation note. And Doug, this is even true with some of the strategic planning stuff. We've got some stuff in the text, and even there's some stuff in the text that's not needed for some organizations. But the facilitation manual has some stuff that, 5% of the companies out there want it. So we've got it over there in the facilitation notes, so I can bring that in if I need to. And I think you'll see that going forward. So just starting of the conversation, like I said, this is the path, this is our objective, this is where we're seeing this go. Is that going to happen in the third quarter? No. It needs to wait till it's an after leadership project. But that's where we are headed to with it.
Well, I think one of the other things that, because I don't do a lot of work with large companies who have internal organizations that do this. We're talking about small, mid-sized businesses who, their definition of Scrum is something you do on the rugby field. So, you know, they don't know this terminology. So it's easy for me to come in with the background that I have. And to my point earlier, you know, it's an old Mark Twain quote, you know, why use metropolis when you can use city? So, you know, it boils down to what the materials are intended to give us, which is the idea Grant and I and others went down, and Jeff went down the path a couple of years ago, is not to get acronym or buzzword heavy, but apply the concept to help them think through efficiency, effectiveness, and adaptability.
What prompted the question, Rick, is I'm working with a client, a national client, and the guys that were out in Arizona are talking about it's an engineering based company,
okay,
and it's how do they become even more effective in terms of assigning work and getting more projects done and adequately followed up on and so on. And one of my other clients who does happen to work for a huge national organization was talking about how Agile has really changed their life in terms of how much faster they can get projects across the goal line.
Mm-hmm.
That led me to go down the path of what's the difference between a good project management program versus Agile. And it turned out to be a lot more distinctions in there than I had ever taken into consideration. I just thought it was just, you know, just a different way of kind of saying the same thing. And what I'm finding out is that's not necessarily true. And so I got to even be careful about the assumptions that I'm making. I see Charles's hand up.
Yeah, I guess I'm not understanding the issue. I mean, Agile, Scrum, all these things go into a design process. I mean, it's still a basic design. You need requirements, you need an architecture, and then you implement. And when you get into implementation, that's when you need agility. But you need to understand, you need to have common goals as to where you're going prior to that. And you need to have the right people, you know, in place for the project. And that's usually where people start to go slow, is they don't have the right talent to go fast. So I don't know what the issue is.
Thank you, Charles. All right. Well, I got 3:58. We got one minute from Tom, then it's time to say goodbye. Tom, you're up.
Okay, no pressure.
Yeah, better be really profound.
Our processes have been really good at helping people cross the bridge of discovery, to use our language, to go, wow, I never looked at it that way before. And so why don't we take that as a core competency and say, okay, what are some of the areas that people need that they've been complacent about? They never looked at it that way. And how can we develop processes to help them to go, lead them across that bridge of discovery?
Okay.
Well, I guess I just, we need a lot more discussion on these topics, Gerard. I think it's we've opened the door to a lot of things, and I'd like to see this continue.
Well, I would like to see it continue at least in some format, because I think we need to just to what we're going to design. I'll put it that way, or Grant, I'll just take your comment and spin it a little bit. At that stage where we're at now, still early on, still gathering, still not, you know, like I said, there's not a chapter written, but we're going to be looking for additional people to put in new ideas. So for those of you on this conversation that have been enjoying it and saying, you know what, I've got some ideas either that I can share that I think that are important, just like the idea of digital transformation. Get in touch with me and Tammy, or Tammy, because we'll be the two that'll be working most on this project going forward. All right.
Rod, can I just throw something into the mix here? As somebody who doesn't really work with large companies and or manufacturing, one of the things that came out of this, listening to this conversation, is that process improvement really goes down to the basic functions of any business. And so as you move forward, you know, I'd like to see, and I know you hate the word generic, but I'd like to see something that addresses it from the basic level and then gives the options, to Doug's point, for what path should be taken for the particular client.
No, you're absolutely right, because the key of this thing has always been the application across the board.
Yep.
Just manufacturers and healthcare. So,
Absolutely.
all right, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your time. I'm going to get a beer and head into the pool.
Enjoy the beach.
I will.
Oh, yes. Jump
Bye,
in
guys.
your meeting.
Take care.
Bye.
I know.